getting a lot of my seed free from like seed dealers, like feed mills, co-ops, Pheasants Forever, conservation groups. And I had to buy some beans. It's harder to get beans free than corn, plus it takes so many bags. So I've got a wide variety of different stuff I'm dumping in here. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute, research equals results. Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app. Hoyt Archery, Wildlife Farming, and PH Outdoors. I'm planting my beans today with the PH Outdoors G8 drill. And this is a no-till drill. Some of the spots I'm going into have been tilled because, excuse me, there was so much vegetation on top of the ground that I needed to work that in, because it would have been really hard to drill through some of that stuff. I had, believe it or not, the wintergreens, Whitetail Institute wintergreens that I planted last summer, the stuff that the deer didn't eat, made it through the winter, and it grew this great big tall stalk and went to flower. It wanted to go to seed, but I knocked it down before that, but it was probably 4 foot tall, just super thick in there. So it'll make tons of organic matter, you know, when I work that back into the ground. It just makes the soil better, but I couldn't drill through that. It was just too thick. So anyway, I did till on the first patch. Most of what I'm doing is going to be no-till. There is a seed chart on their website, on the PH Outdoors website, and I'm going to pull it up here. And it tells you what to set the drill at. Let's see. Okay, so soybeans, 68 pounds per acre, and then 96 are the two, between 5 and 6 on this slip clutch, or whatever they call this system. And then you got to use gate number 2. So on the other side, we'll put it on 2, and we'll set this one on 5.5. That would get me halfway between 68 and 96, about 75 pounds per acre, and that's about what I usually put down for beans. So let's do that first. Let's get it at 5.5. Okay. You can see the needle in there. All I'm doing is just running that over until it's at 5.5. And it's surprising how close that seed chart has been for me. I've planted a whole bunch of different blends from Whitetail Institute. I've planted sorghum, I've planted beans, I've planted a lot of stuff, and I've just used the settings off that chart, and they've been very accurate. But there's ways to calibrate. You know, if you're wanting to really zero it in, it's not hard to do a custom calibration of whatever seed you're using. The drill is set up for that. It's got a little calibration tray that you can run the seed into, and you know, you raise it up, you turn the drive wheel a certain number of times, and then you weigh the amount of seed that came out, and that's how you calibrate. Okay, 5.5. Right at 5.5. So now I can just lock it down. Okay. So the last thing I'll always do before I plant is make sure I've got my depth set right. And I'm going into tilled ground. So I'm going to go with the 1-inch setting, and maybe I'll test it out and see how deep it's going once I start to drill. If it's going too deep, because the ground is soft and this thing is pushing down into it, then I'll go to the 1/2-inch setting. But it's real easy to change that. You just move these pins. You can see them on each one of these droppers. This is the thing that determines how deep it goes. And you can change where this pin is so that it doesn't go as deep. And that's the final thing that you do. You always test the ground first, make a little bit of a run, and see how deep your seed is, and then make the final adjustment. You want the beans to be fairly shallow. You know, 1/2 inch to 1 inch, even 1.5 inches max to be fine. You just don't want to go too deep on beans, otherwise, you know, they don't come up as well. Yeah, that looks a lot better. There's a scattered few that are still on top of the ground, but that's okay. I remember one old farmer told me one time that if you don't see any beans on top of the ground, you're planting them too deep. Well, we can see a few here, but at first we could see a lot of beans on top. So I think we got it set. I'm gonna go ahead and I've got this spot and then several others around the farm today. We'll just film here, and then one other location. You'll get the idea of how this process works. Got a good start on my bean plots. This one that we just did is a spot that we call the open gate. And maybe a month ago or so, I talked about what I was going to plant. And I talked about putting beans on this side of the open gate, and then the imperial whitetail clover on the inside. And the other third of this 1.5 acre, slightly more plot on this side of the gate is going to be in sorghum. So I haven't planted that yet. Sorghum likes warmer soil temperatures. It doesn't do well until the soil temperature gets up around 65 degrees. So I'm sure it's not there yet. Give it a couple more days, maybe a week, and we'll be ready to plant that sorghum. So it's like I was mentioning earlier, it's the 31st of May, and it's a good time to get the beans and the corn and everything wrapped up, and maybe just a little early, like I said, for the sorghum, but that'll come next. So I'm going to have all my beans done today, maybe a couple little small patches here and there left, but anything that doesn't do well, anytime your beans don't do well, you can come back again in the end of July with the brassica blend and just broadcast that in. So that, for me, that's the winter greens. I like that winter greens blend. That does really well here, and the deer love it. So that might be what ends up on this strip. But the rest of the spots I should get a really nice stand of beans, and that's going to be the core of my food plots on the farm this year. Beans are really going to be kind of the main thing, with corn being secondary. This is a no-till drill. It's the PH Outdoors G8, and those are really nice because you don't have to till it up, and you don't have to expose the subsoil to the air and dry it out. You can put the seed right into the moisture and get it to germinate, quickly and get growing. So that's a bonus, but you get to control the rate. I like drilling whenever I can. I mean, I plant corn with a corn planter. I plant almost everything else with the drill. So that's one way. You can use an actual corn planter with bean plates, and you can plant beans on 30-inch rows, where you can crisscross, I've planted them on 30-inch rows and done fine. So that's another way you can plant beans. It's not quite as good as the drilling, because on the 7.5-inch rows you can canopy sooner with your plants, and you don't need as much weed control. The weeds come in whenever the sunlight hits the ground. So if you can get the beans up in canopy on the narrower rows, usually you don't have quite as big of an issue with weeds. You can just till up the ground, broadcast the beans, and drag them in. Just like we talked about in a different episode about alternative ways to plant corn. You can plant beans that way too. Plus, if you want to till the ground, you can get a tillage drill, and you can plant beans with a tillage drill. I mean, farmers did that, for decades before the no-till became, a little bit more of the recommended method of planting. So there's a lot of ways to get beans in the ground. I'll be doing updates and showing you how this does over the next month or so. We're supposed to get rain in a couple of days. With the subsoil moisture we've got, plus some rain, these should really take off. I'll come back and spray them for weeds, once they get growing. Well, that's it for this episode. Like I said, I'll keep doing updates, and I'm sure there's going to be a few more little food plots that we're going to build here on the Dream Farm. So I'll show you all that stuff as we go. Well, I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you back here soon for the next episode of Dream Farm. And remember to always dream big.